4 years ago, I couldn't sleep through the night. Every morning at 4:47 a.m., like clockwork, my bladder would wake me up screaming for relief. I'd shuffle to the bathroom, stand there for what felt like forever, and barely get a trickle. The stream that used to be strong and confident had turned into this pathetic drip that embarrassed me to my core. My wife would ask if everything was okay when I'd come back to bed 20 minutes later, and I'd just grunt and roll over, too ashamed to admit what was happening to my body. That was my life for 18 months, until I discovered something so simple, so ridiculous, that I almost didn't try it. A 30-second morning routine that literally saved my prostate and gave me back my dignity. If you're waking up multiple times at night, if your stream is getting weaker every month, if you're terrified of what the doctor might find when you finally work up the courage to get checked, then what I'm about to share could change everything for you. Because 4 years later, at 65, I sleep through the night every single night. My stream is stronger than it's been in a decade, and my prostate has actually shrunk back to nearly normal size. No surgery, no prescription drugs, no expensive procedures. Just 30 seconds every morning that reset my entire urological system. Let me take you back to where this nightmare began. I was 61, feeling pretty good about life, when I started noticing these subtle changes that I kept making excuses for. The first thing was the nighttime trips to the bathroom. Initially, it was just once a night, and I convinced myself it was because I was drinking too much water before bed. Then it became twice a night, then 3 times. By the time I was getting up 4 or 5 times every night, I couldn't ignore it anymore. The sleep deprivation was killing me. I was exhausted during the day, irritable with my family, and my work performance was suffering because my brain felt like it was wrapped in fog. But the worst part wasn't even the sleep disruption. It was what happened when I actually got to the bathroom. Standing there, waiting, pushing, straining, and getting this weak, interrupted stream that would stop and start without any warning. Sometimes I'd think I was done, zip up, and then feel like I needed to go again immediately. Other times I'd stand there for 5 minutes and nothing would happen at all. The humiliation was overwhelming. Here I was, a grown man who had raised 3 kids and built a successful career, and I couldn't even urinate properly anymore. I felt like my body was betraying me, like my masculinity was slowly draining away along with my ability to function normally. The anxiety started creeping in around month 6. Every time I went to the bathroom, I'd wonder if this was the time nothing would come out at all. I started mapping out bathroom locations wherever I went, like some kind of paranoid tourist. I'd arrive early to restaurants to check where the restroom was, just in case I needed to make a quick exit from dinner. I stopped drinking fluids after 6 p.m., which left me constantly dehydrated, but didn't really help with the nighttime issues anyway. The worst moment came during my grandson's birthday party, when I excused myself to use the bathroom and ended up trapped in there for 25 minutes, missing him blow out his candles because I literally couldn't empty my bladder. My daughter knocked on the door asking if I was okay, and I had to lie and say I had an upset stomach. The shame was eating me alive. I knew something was seriously wrong, but I was terrified of what the doctor would tell me. The word cancer kept bouncing around in my head like a pinball, and I couldn't bring myself to face that possibility. So I did what millions of men do. I suffered in silence and hoped it would somehow get better on its own. After 8 more months of deteriorating symptoms, I finally dragged myself to see Dr. Martinez, my family physician. The examination was exactly as uncomfortable and humiliating as I'd imagined. The digital rectal exam, the awkward questions about my urinary habits, the blood tests, the ultrasound. When he told me my prostate was significantly enlarged, about twice the normal size for a man my age, it felt like a punch to the gut, even though I'd been expecting bad news. He explained that I had benign prostatic hyperplasia, or BPH, which affects about 60% of men over 60. The enlarged prostate was pressing against my urethra like a clamp on a garden hose, which explained the weak stream and the constant feeling that I couldn't empty completely. Dr. Martinez was professional and reassuring, explaining that this wasn't cancer and that there were treatment options available. He started talking about prescription medications like tamsulosin and finasteride, explaining how they work to either relax the muscles around the prostate or shrink the gland itself. Then he mentioned that if medications didn't work, there were surgical procedures we could consider, including something called TURP, where they essentially core out part of the prostate tissue. The idea of surgery on such a sensitive area made me physically nauseous. I asked him about natural alternatives, dietary changes, supplements, anything that might help without pumping my body full of chemicals or going under the knife. His response was diplomatic but discouraging. He said some men reported improvements with saw palmetto or pumpkin seed extract, but the scientific evidence was limited and the results were usually modest at best. I'm not someone who automatically distrusts conventional medicine, but something about the way Dr. Martinez presented my options didn't sit right with me. It felt like a one-way street toward increasing medical intervention, without any real exploration of why my prostate had enlarged in the first place, or what I might be able to do to address the root causes. I filled the prescription for tamsulosin and took it faithfully for 6 weeks. It did help somewhat with the flow, but the side effects were brutal. I felt dizzy and lightheaded constantly. My energy levels plummeted, and worst of all, it completely killed my libido and sexual function. The medication was trading one problem for another, and I decided that wasn't acceptable. I wanted to find a real solution, not just mask the symptoms with drugs that made me feel like a zombie. That's when I started diving deep into research about prostate health, spending hours every night reading medical journals, patient forums, alternative health websites, and anything else I could find. Most of what I discovered was either too technical to understand or too good to be true. But slowly, I started noticing patterns in the research that mainstream medicine seemed to be overlooking completely. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. I was reading a forum post from another man who had reversed his BPH symptoms naturally, and he mentioned something about the connection between stress, breathing patterns, and pelvic floor tension. He linked to a small study from a urology clinic in Germany that had investigated the relationship between chronic stress and prostate enlargement. The researchers found that men with BPH had significantly higher levels of chronic muscular tension in their pelvic floor muscles, and that this tension was often accompanied by shallow, restrictive breathing patterns that kept their nervous system locked in a state of chronic stress. The theory was fascinating. When we're chronically stressed, our breathing becomes shallow and rapid, which keeps our sympathetic nervous system activated. This constant state of fight or flight causes the smooth muscles throughout our body, including those in and around the prostate, to remain contracted and tight. Over years and decades, this chronic tension can contribute to inflammation, reduced blood flow, and hormonal imbalances that promote prostate enlargement. The German researchers had developed a simple breathing and relaxation protocol that helped men reset their nervous system and release the chronic tension that was contributing to their symptoms. The results were remarkable. After 12 weeks of daily practice, 73% of participants showed measurable improvement in urinary flow rates, and 46% experienced a reduction in prostate size on ultrasound. I was skeptical but intrigued. This wasn't some miracle cure or exotic supplement. It was based on solid physiological principles about how stress affects our body's internal systems. The technique itself was almost embarrassingly simple. Every morning, immediately after waking up, I would lie in bed and perform what I started calling my prostate reset breath. Here's exactly what I did, and what I still do every single morning 4 years later. I'd place one hand on my chest and one hand on my lower abdomen, just below my navel. Then I'd take the deepest possible breath through my nose, making sure that only the hand on my abdomen moved, while the hand on my chest stayed relatively still. This ensures that I'm breathing with my diaphragm rather than my chest muscles, which activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode that counteracts chronic stress. As I inhaled, I'd visualize the breath flowing all the way down to my pelvic floor, imagining that I was gently inflating the entire area around my prostate with healing oxygen. At the peak of the inhalation, I'd hold the breath for a count of 4, while consciously relaxing every muscle in my pelvis, including the muscles that surround the prostate and control urination. Then I'd exhale very slowly through slightly pursed lips, taking twice as long to exhale as I did to inhale. During the exhale, I'd visualize tension and inflammation flowing out of my prostate area like water draining from a bathtub. I'd repeat this cycle exactly 10 times, which took about 30 seconds total. The entire routine was so simple that I almost talked myself out of trying it, but I figured I had nothing to lose. The first week, I didn't notice any dramatic changes, which honestly made me question whether I was wasting my time. But I'd committed to giving it at least a month, so I stuck with the routine every morning without fail. By the end of the second week, I realized that I was only getting up twice per night instead of my usual 4 or 5 times. I didn't want to get my hopes up because I'd experienced temporary improvements before that didn't last. But by week 3, something undeniable was happening. My morning urination was stronger and more complete. I was starting to sleep for longer stretches without interruption. The constant feeling of incomplete emptying was beginning to fade. Most importantly, I was feeling more relaxed and less anxious overall, which I hadn't expected as a side effect of the breathing technique. By the end of the first month, I was down to getting up just once per night, sometimes not at all. My daytime urinary frequency had decreased dramatically. The stream was stronger and more consistent. I felt like a completely different person, and all from 30 seconds of focused breathing every morning. I was so shocked by the results that I started documenting everything. My nighttime bathroom trips, my daytime frequency, my sleep quality, even my overall mood and energy levels. The improvements were consistent and sustained, not just temporary fluctuations. Curious about what was actually happening in my body, I dove deeper into the research behind this technique. What I discovered was that chronic stress doesn't just affect our prostate through muscular tension. It also disrupts our hormonal balance in ways that directly promote prostate enlargement. When we're chronically stressed, our bodies produce elevated levels of cortisol, which interferes with testosterone metabolism and increases the production of dihydrotestosterone, or DHT. DHT is the primary hormone responsible for prostate growth, and men with BPH typically have significantly higher levels of DHT in their prostate tissue than men with healthy prostates. By activating the parasympathetic nervous system through deep breathing, we can reduce cortisol production and help restore normal hormonal balance. Additionally, the improved oxygenation and blood flow that comes from proper breathing helps reduce inflammation throughout the pelvic region. Chronic inflammation is another key driver of prostate enlargement, and anything we can do to reduce systemic inflammation will benefit prostate health. The breathing technique was addressing multiple root causes simultaneously: stress reduction, hormonal balance, improved circulation, and reduced inflammation. It wasn't just treating symptoms, it was actually helping to reverse the underlying processes that had caused my prostate to enlarge in the first place. To track my progress more systematically, I started using an app that was specifically designed for men dealing with prostate issues. A friend from my support group had mentioned it, and I was curious to see if having detailed tracking would help me optimize my routine. I put the link in the pinned comment if you want to check it out. The app helped me monitor not just my urinary symptoms, but also my stress levels, sleep quality, and overall well-being on a day-to-day basis. What I discovered was that there were certain patterns in my symptoms that I never would have noticed without consistent tracking. For example, on days when I was particularly stressed or hadn't slept well, my prostate symptoms would flare up slightly, even with the breathing routine. This helped me realize that the breathing technique was just one piece of a larger puzzle, and that other lifestyle factors were still playing a role in my prostate health. The app helped me identify which foods seemed to trigger inflammation, how different types of exercise affected my symptoms, and even how seasonal changes impacted my condition. Having this level of detailed tracking was incredibly empowering because it helped me take a more active role in managing my health rather than just hoping for the best. By month 3 of practicing the breathing technique daily, I decided to get follow-up testing to see if there were any objective changes in my prostate. Dr. Martinez was surprised when I told him I'd stopped taking the tamsulosin and that my symptoms had improved dramatically with just a breathing exercise. He was professional about it, but I could tell he was skeptical. The ultrasound results, however, spoke for themselves. My prostate had shrunk from 47 milliliters to 31 milliliters, still slightly enlarged compared to a young man's prostate, but well within the normal range for someone my age. More importantly, my urinary flow rate had improved from a pitiful 8.2 milliliters per second to a robust 16.7 milliliters per second, which was actually better than average for a man in his 60s. Dr. Martinez admitted that he'd never seen such dramatic improvement from a non-medical intervention, and he asked me to write down exactly what I'd been doing so he could share it with other patients. The validation from objective medical testing was incredibly satisfying. But honestly, I didn't need the numbers to know that my life had been transformed. I was sleeping through the night, urinating normally, and feeling like myself again for the first time in over 2 years. What really convinced me that this wasn't just a temporary improvement was meeting other men who had experienced similar results. Through online forums and local support groups, I connected with dozens of men who had discovered various breathing and relaxation techniques that helped their prostate symptoms. There was Robert, a 58-year-old mechanic who had avoided surgery by practicing a similar routine combined with specific dietary changes. There was Michael, a 67-year-old retired teacher who had shrunk his prostate by 40% using breathing exercises along with targeted supplements. And there was James, a 72-year-old grandfather who had completely eliminated his nighttime urination by addressing the stress and anxiety that were contributing to his symptoms. Each of these men had discovered slightly different approaches, but the common thread was that they'd all addressed the mind-body connection that mainstream medicine tends to ignore. They'd recognized that prostate health isn't just about hormones and anatomy. It's also about stress management, nervous system balance, and overall well-being. The more men I talked to, the more convinced I became that what I'd experienced wasn't a fluke or a placebo effect. It was a real physiological response to addressing the root causes of prostate enlargement, rather than just treating the symptoms. Let me give you some specific tips that can enhance the effectiveness of the basic breathing technique. First, timing matters more than you might think. I discovered that doing the breathing routine immediately after waking up, before getting out of bed, was significantly more effective than doing it later in the day. There's something about the relaxed transitional state between sleep and waking that makes our nervous system more receptive to this kind of reset. If you try to do it after you've already started your day and your stress response is activated, it's much harder to achieve the same level of deep relaxation. Second, environment plays a crucial role. I make sure my bedroom is cool, dark, and quiet when I do the breathing routine. Any distractions or discomfort will interfere with your ability to fully relax and activate the parasympathetic response. Third, consistency is absolutely critical. This isn't something you can do occasionally when you remember. It needs to become as automatic as brushing your teeth. I've been doing this every single morning for 4 years now, even when I travel, even when I'm sick, even when I don't feel like it. The cumulative effect of daily practice is what creates lasting change in your nervous system and hormonal balance. There's also a dietary component that can significantly amplify the benefits of the breathing technique. During my research, I discovered that certain foods can either support prostate health or contribute to inflammation and enlargement. The biggest culprits are processed foods high in sugar and refined carbohydrates, which spike insulin levels and promote inflammation throughout the body. Dairy products can also be problematic for some men because they contain hormones that may stimulate prostate growth. On the flip side, foods rich in lycopene, like tomatoes and watermelon, have been shown to support prostate health, as have zinc-rich foods like pumpkin seeds and oysters. I started incorporating a handful of raw pumpkin seeds into my breakfast every morning, and I switched from regular tomatoes to organic paste that's higher in bioavailable lycopene. I also began drinking green tea instead of coffee because the catechins in green tea have anti-inflammatory properties that specifically benefit the prostate. These dietary changes didn't work overnight like the breathing technique did, but over several months I noticed that they seemed to enhance and stabilize the improvements I was experiencing. The combination of daily stress reduction through breathing and consistent anti-inflammatory nutrition created a synergistic effect that was more powerful than either approach alone. One thing that surprised me was how much the breathing technique improved other aspects of my health beyond just prostate function. Within a few months of daily practice, my blood pressure had dropped from borderline high to completely normal without any medication changes. My sleep quality improved dramatically, not just because I wasn't getting up to urinate, but because I was falling asleep faster and sleeping more deeply. My chronic lower back pain, which I'd attributed to getting older, virtually disappeared as the chronic muscle tension throughout my core and pelvic area released. Even my digestion improved, which makes sense given that the parasympathetic nervous system controls digestive function. My wife commented that I seemed calmer and more present, less reactive to daily stressors. I realized that the chronic stress that had been contributing to my prostate problems had also been affecting every other system in my body. By addressing the root cause through nervous system regulation, I was experiencing benefits that extended far beyond what I'd originally hoped to achieve. This whole body improvement reinforced my conviction that I was on the right track and motivated me to continue the practice indefinitely. The most common question I get from other men is whether this technique works for everyone, and I have to be honest, it doesn't. I've shared this approach with probably 50 or 60 men over the past 4 years, and I'd estimate that about 70% of them experience significant improvement, while 30% see minimal or no benefit. The men who tend to respond best are those who have a significant stress component to their symptoms, who are willing to be consistent with daily practice, and who are open to addressing lifestyle factors beyond just the breathing technique. The men who don't respond as well are often dealing with more advanced prostate enlargement that may have structural components that can't be reversed through stress reduction alone, or they're not willing to commit to the daily routine required for lasting change. There are also some men whose prostate problems are primarily caused by factors other than stress and inflammation. genetic predisposition, environmental toxins, or hormonal issues that require different approaches. What I've learned is that this breathing technique is incredibly powerful for the right person, but it's not a magic bullet that works for everyone, regardless of their specific situation. If you're going to try this approach, I want to give you realistic expectations about the timeline. Don't expect overnight miracles. In my case, I started noticing subtle improvements around day 10, meaningful changes by week 3, and dramatic improvement by month 2. The timeline can vary significantly from person to person based on how long you've had symptoms, how severe your enlargement is, your overall health status, and how consistently you practice the technique. Some men notice improvements within a few days, while others need several months of consistent practice before they see significant changes. The key is to commit to at least 3 months of daily practice before deciding whether it's working for you. Also, don't stop any medications your doctor has prescribed without consulting with them first. This breathing technique can be used safely alongside conventional treatments, and if it works for you, you can work with your doctor to potentially reduce or eliminate medications over time. The goal isn't to replace good medical care. It's to address aspects of prostate health that conventional medicine often overlooks. Looking back on this journey 4 years later, I'm incredibly grateful that I didn't just accept the conventional treatment path and resign myself to a lifetime of medications and potential surgery. Taking control of my own health and discovering that my body had an innate ability to heal itself when given the right conditions was profoundly empowering. The 30-second breathing routine that saved my prostate has become much more than just a medical intervention. It's a daily reminder that I have the power to influence my own health outcomes through simple, natural practices. Every morning when I do those 10 deep breaths, I'm not just supporting my prostate health. I'm setting a positive tone for the entire day, managing my stress levels, and maintaining the nervous system balance that supports optimal function throughout my body. If you're struggling with prostate symptoms and feeling frustrated with limited treatment options, I encourage you to give this approach a sincere try. 30 seconds every morning is a small investment that could potentially transform your quality of life. If my story has helped you, I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to stay updated on everything I continue to learn about natural health approaches. And remember, that tracking app I mentioned is linked in the pinned comment below if you want to monitor your progress systematically. Your prostate problems don't have to define your future. Sometimes the most powerful solutions are also the simplest ones.